CitizenCon 2954 has come to a close, and with it, we got a lot of information about upcoming vehicles and ships. The teasers for CitizenCon clued us into a focus on MISC specifically, generating a lot of buzz around bringing the freelancers to the high standard of the Zeus or the Spirit series. Along the same vein, we got a much bigger surprise, the brand new series of ships, the MISC Starlancers. Hello folks, Space Tech here, and welcome to a first look and buyer's guide for the MISC Starlancer MAX, TAC, and BLD, or BLD. It's worth noting that the Starlancer MAX will be launching in the next month, with the TAC in active development in the following 12 months. Finally, the build is gated by base building and construction, so has the least details available and will be released last. To help you decide if a Starlancer is for you, I'll be diving into the differences between each variant as well as comparing them against their competitors across different manufacturers. I have ordered this video from the ship we know most about to the one that's farthest away, so feel free to jump around to sections that interest you the most. If I helped make up your mind by the end, a like and subscribe is always appreciated. Let's start with what the Starlancers have in common. These are all fairly large ships with a design reminiscent of the MISC Odyssey. While I don't find the form of MISC ships particularly attractive, I know for a fact that there's a lot of you out there that really enjoy the obviously industrial design, highlighted by the sheet metal-like look of the exteriors. All of the Starlancers have a length of 83 meters, a width of 52, and a height of 16. For some context on what that feels like in-game, this is 10 meters less than a 600i in length, with an almost identical width and height. It's actually quite a bit bigger than the Constellation series, being around 20 meters longer in length and width, a comparison that'll be relevant later. The Starlancers also share a lot of their weaponry with each other, each having 4 size 4 weapons controlled by the pilot. Unlike most other ships, however, these weapons are split into 2 gimbal turrets on either side of the hull, exactly like the Freelancer weapons. This will limit your DPS when aiming sharply off to one side, as your hull will block the line of sight to the other pair of guns. Speaking of blocked lines of sight, the Starlancers have 2 remote turrets on top of the hull, each with a pair of size 4 weapons. While this is pretty good and compares well with the turrets on the Constellation, the placement of these guns is really going to impact their effectiveness. Similar to the Freelancer, the Starlancers have a hump on top of the ship in the middle. This is going to seriously impact the ability of the rear turret, as it is limited to a 180-degree arc behind the ship, just as the front turret can only shoot at targets in front of the ship. The TAC variant does have more weapons, which we will cover when highlighting it. The Starlancers come with a total of 16 size 3 missiles that will be locked to that size and number due to the bespoke nature of the launchers equipped. When it comes to components, these ships have a pretty standard layout for ships of this size. They all have a size 2 quantum and jump drive, with a size 2 computer and a size 2 radar. They also have 2 size 2 batteries and 3 relays to manage for engineering gameplay. The MAX variant has a size 3 shield and 2 size 2 power plants. The TAC variant has a step up from this that we'll talk about when we get into its highlights. That's about it for similarities, so how do these ships differ and specialize, and how do they stack up against their competition? Starting off with the incoming Starlancer MAX. The MAX, or cargo version of the Starlancer, comes in at a concept price of $225 war bond or $250 if you're using store credit. As the cargo variant of the series, the MAX comes with a few upgrades when compared to its sister ships. The most obvious of which is its cargo capacity, coming in at 224 STU. All this cargo will come at an increased weight, of course, and so the MAX comes with an extra 2 VTOL thrusters on top of the 4 from the other variants. We also get a central deployable cargo grid that brings out some of the cargo down to ground level, making it much easier to move cargo on and off of the ship, especially if you're using something like the Argo Atlas. We will be able to store 128 SU of cargo in the central deployable cargo area, with the remaining 96 SU to be kept in the back with the vehicle bay. This brings us to the internals of the MAX. Starting off on the top floor, in the front we have our cockpit. Unfortunately, it has been confirmed that the Starlancer will have the now infamous letterbox view from its cockpit design. After flying ships like the Zeus and the Spirit series, I am not looking forward to testing this ship's visibility with this design. Keep in mind, this will be the largest ship that we have so far that has such a compromised view of its surroundings. Take the difficulty of flying a Freelancer in first person and ramp it all the way up. Behind our pilot seats, we have another room that I suspect will house a couple of smaller components like life support. Behind that, we have our turret gunner room with 2 stations, one for each turret. Keep in mind, with the improved functionality of MFDs after 3.24.2, These turret seats will be best equipped and located to check on internal systems and begin triaging engineering situations that may arise. Behind this are our 4 escape pods for the whole crew, as well as our elevator room. We can use this elevator here to move between both floors, as well as an egress point to exit the ship. We also have a ladder here in case of congestion or failure of the elevator. Carrack owners are going to know what I'm talking about. With this egress point being so close to the pilot's chair, who knows, it might be faster to get to the pilot's seat of a massive Starlancer than it is to get to the pilot's seat of C1 Spirit. Behind this, we have the beginning of our habitation area. With a rather large mess hall complete with a pool table, kitchen, bar seating, and a dining table, you will also have skylights that will make sitting in this space even more enjoyable. Even as someone who thinks that habitation areas bring a lot of life to the verse and will be important for NPC crew in the future, I think this space is just a little too much. I would have happily traded some of it away for a little bit more functional area, even if just for some extra shielded cargo. Continuing with the theme of potentially wasted space is the barracks, or I guess the hotel suites in this case. There are a total of 4 individual rooms here, each of which has its own shower toilet area, space for some activities, a desk and chair, and for some bizarre reason, double beds? I'm not sure who the target audience is, but John Crew must know that there's no way the residents of this room are going to have company over. Honestly, between the rooms and the large mess hall, I feel like they could have fit an entire Mirai Fury hangar in this ship, or even just increase the cargo capacity by a few hundred SCU. We'll have to see if people end up valuing this space, but something tells me they would have preferred much more cargo anyway. At the end of the hotel suites, we also have 2 elevators to take you between floors. Finally, we have the engineering room. This is where the majority of your large and medium-sized components will sit. You'll also have access to your engineering terminal here, so keep this location in mind, as it really is quite far from the cockpit, and so you may want to send your co-pilot here proactively if you're expecting trouble. Heading to the back of the lower floor, we have our garage/secondary cargo hold. This is accessible through a ramp at the back. It is a very large ramp, and so it should easily be able to fit an Ursa rover, and maybe even a Tumbril Storm, without taking up any cargo space. Being able to hold an Ursa rover immediately increases the value of this ship, because you can choose to load the respawn-capable medical Ursa into the back. This grants you respawn capabilities. As a ship that is supposedly designed to go into deep space, being able to venture into potentially hazardous areas without the risk of being sent back to your starting location is going to be hugely beneficial. Apart from an Ursa, you should easily be able to hold several Atlases to help you load and unload your cargo with ultimate ease. Moving forward, we have our dropping cargo bay that will allow for extremely easy access to your cargo both for loading and unloading. From what we have seen, it seems as though you may be able to fit 4 32 SCU crates. This would mean that you can swap out a crazy 120 SCU of cargo extremely quickly as long as it's in those large containers. To make sure that you can still traverse the bottom floor, a catwalk is suspended in the middle of the cargo deck that will take you directly from the rear cargo area to the main elevator room. This area once again has a ladder and elevators to the other floor and the ground. It also has an airlock to allow for docking if required. Finally, we have the armory. This area seems to have a weapons locker along with 4 suit lockers. As was described during CitizenCon, different sets of armor are going to have vastly different use cases and capabilities. To that end, having a suit locker that will let you quickly swap to the needs of the expedition is going to be extremely valuable. There may be certain times you want heavy armor to defend your cargo loaders, and other times you might need to swap into an EVA-capable suit to get around a zero-gravity situation. Regardless, you'll be happy that you had this locker. So who are the competitors to the $250 Starlancer MAX? The most obvious comparison is going to be the Constellation Taurus at $200. There's a Hull B at $140 and a Caterpillar at $330. Obviously, if you want the most amount of cargo for the price, a Hull B is going to be the easy choice. It's worth noting, however, that this ship still has a lot of kinks to be worked out, and is a fairly old concept with no work planned for it anytime soon. The Caterpillar is a fair bit more expensive and carries twice the cargo. It comes with the promise of one day having some form of modularity, the details of which can only be speculated, unfortunately. This leaves the Taurus. This is the closest in price, components, and cargo capacity. At $50 less than a Starlancer MAX, you get 60 SCU less cargo, but you gain a shielded cargo area, an unbelievable amount of pilot DPS with 4 size 5 weapons, and most importantly, a well-placed tractor beam. As CIG has told us in the past, handheld tractor beams are about to get a whole lot less useful. The Taurus's ability to load and unload your cargo straight from the cockpit is really helpful in case you want to make a quick stop or if conditions are hazardous outside. With the Starlancer, you're going to have to go all the way to the back and unload your Atlas to begin moving around large cargo. All the while, this is going to leave your cockpit unmanned if you're riding solo. That is the crux of the decision in my opinion. If you're someone who primarily finds themselves flying solo, the inbuilt tractor beam, smaller footprint, and amazing pilot DPS all make the Taurus shine as the obvious choice, with the shielded cargo being the cherry on top. If, on the other hand, you expect to have a crew, the better living quarters, rear turret coverage, and most importantly, the ability to carry a vehicle like the Nursa without compromising your cargo capacity make the Starlancer a better pick. I can see it going either way, so it may even come down to the fact that the Starlancer is going to have a much more polished interior compared to the Constellation given their ages. Moving on to the Starlancer TAC. This combat-focused variant comes in at $295 war bond or $330 with store credit. You're obviously paying a fairly hefty combat tax for this ship, so what do you get for the money? The first difference are the obviously apparent 2-man turrets on either side of the front of the ship. Each one of these turrets comes with 2 size 5 weapons, which is an absolutely massive amount of DPS that you can add to your forward-facing assault. The location of these turrets on the bottom of the ship also indicate the ability for the TAC to take on grounded targets. I'm hoping that this ends up being a more common scenario in a verse with base building. Due to the combat-oriented design of the ship, you also gain an additional size 3 shield, which is a massive amount of extra shielding, twice as much as the other Starlancers in fact. The second shield also gives you a bit of redundancy in the case that you lose one of your shield generators. To support the extra turrets and shields, you end up with an upgraded size 3 power plant instead of the 2 size 2s on the Max variant. While this does bring a lot more power, it is now a component that cannot be swapped out on the fly due to its size, in case it breaks or is destroyed. You also lose the majority of your cargo, going down to only 96 SCU, in return for 3 standout features. 1. You gain dropship capabilities with a series of 8 jump seats where the belly of the TAC opens up. 2. You gain 2 tier 3 medbeds, which is better than the one on the Nursa because you should be able to carry more of the resource used by medbeds. It also gives you the ability to spawn 2 players at one time, allowing them to return to the fight sooner. Finally, you also gain a dedicated Fury hangar. While we usually end up seeing citizens cramming all sorts of ships where they shouldn't be, the tiny footprint of the Fury does make me wonder if there will actually be room for something bigger than a Fury. On the inside, we have an identical cockpit layout with these same remote turret gunners at the back of the room. Then we have our escape pod room, followed by the elevator room, all exactly the same as our Starlancer MAX. That's where the similarities seem to end. The habitation area seems to have been cut down significantly. We can't see the whole thing, but from the image that we've been shown, it looks to have a simple mess area, shower area, and bunks for the crew. It will be interesting to see if this variant only has enough room for 4 people to sleep, because a full contingency worth of soldiers for the jump seats would be left without a bed for any long-term extended travel. This is all a far cry from the 5-star hotel available on the MAX. Moving back brings us to the Fury hangar. From the perspective shown here, it does look like the room is slightly larger than a Fury, but from first glance, I don't think you'd ever really be able to get an arrow inside this hold. I'd expect this room to have some sort of repair and rearm functionality, just because it'll help differentiate this room from any other cargo hold that can fit a Fury, like the one in the Spirit C1 for example. Finally, we have our engineering room, which should be largely the same, unless the upsized power plant and extra shield generator are forced to be placed somewhere else on the ship. Going down a floor, we end up in an identical cargo hold to the MAX, with the same 96 SCU of cargo space and the area to hold at Nursa. If we end up being able to carry a Tumbril Storm, the lethality of the TAC against ground vehicles goes up even further. Up ahead, we have our twin tier 3 medbeds, conveniently placed right next to our jump seats to allow you to get straight back into the action. We then have our access to the size 5 turrets, the elevator room, and the suit locker room. Unless this locker room is larger, I can imagine that these lockers are really only meant for the main crew of the ship. The resupplying of troops will have to happen from the boxes in the cargo hold. That's the TAC. In my opinion, the ship is less of a gunship and more of a massive dropship. It's a tier up from the Valkyrie. It has jump seats, downwards facing turrets, and even the Fury is largely suited to attack ground targets, as its weapons and range are both too small to engage with larger targets in space for any extended period of time. In fact, you may want to keep the Fury pretty close to the Starlancer in the case that his pilot dies. Remember, these are tier 3 beds and so have the most limited respawn range. Against ground targets, the current range should be more than enough to cover the Fury's area of operation. So who were the competitors to the Starlancer TAC? The size and number of weapons does seem to remind people of the Redeemer gunship, especially given that the Deemer will have a dropship functionality as well. The Redeemer also comes in at the identical price of $330, with a crew of 5 to man every gun, the same as the Starlancer. When it comes to components, the TAC has way more shielding now that the Redeemer has been downsized to 6 size 2 shields. You do end up with a lot more power on the Redeemer, so I'd imagine that the capacitors on the turrets will have to be larger there. Finally, the Redeemer is a lot smaller than the Starlancer. This smaller size will make it harder to hit at the cost of having 5% of the total cargo capacity. I would also imagine that the Redeemer will be far more maneuverable than the large, bulky Starlancer. In all of these respects, I think a Redeemer is the better choice if all that matters to you is a 5-man gunship, and the Perseus isn't exactly what you're looking for. With the TAC, you get more firepower with the size 5 weapons, but it is a far bigger target with a much smaller arc of fire. In addition, the sheer added versatility of the Starlancer cannot be ignored. If we take ground assaults into consideration, you get the far better jump seats, more downwards facing turrets, medbeds, way more cargo for the loot of your attack, and of course the ability to carry a ground vehicle and a Fury. It really is no contest at that point. As for the other dropships, at $45 more, the Valkyrie has never made sense to me at that price. It is too expensive and does too little. The Starlancer has a beat in pretty much every single metric that matters, so unless you really love the Valk, the Starlancer TAC would be my pick. The last ship of note would be the Retaliator. It gets you some really solid versatility with its modules and the ability to carry size 9 torpedoes. You end up with far less DPS, cargo, versatility, and of course the same drawbacks of no Fury or ground vehicles. All in all, I think the TAC is positioned well amongst its competition, and I see nothing wrong that would make me question its purchase. Finally, we have the Starlancer build. This is supposed to be the building or construction variant of the Starlancer. Where the Pioneer will be used to build XL-sized buildings and structures, the build will be used to build at the large size category. It uniquely comes equipped with 4 large drones and all the supporting infrastructure like a drone operator seat and drone arms to resupply those drones. You end up with the same components as the MAX variant, except it comes with 128 SUF cargo compared to the 96 of the TAC. The build variant of the Starlancer is being tied to the release of base building and will be released whenever that comes out. For that reason, it is not on sale yet, and so we can only speculate as to what the price might be. As for competitors, we're really just starting to get information about construction vehicles and ships, and so the only possible competitor that exists right now is the construction module on the Galaxy. Seeing as we've gotten 0 updates about that ship, however, I wouldn't be surprised to find out that CIG themselves are figuring out what it will be capable of. So who are these ships for? I'll talk broadly about the MAX and TAC variants when I say that I think they're fairly positioned within their size class. For the MAX variant specifically, I think it trades blows with the Taurus and cleanly differentiates itself with its superior size and amenities. It's obviously worse for solo pilots as a counterbalance. The TAC variant is one that I'd be sitting on personally. I think it's really cool and shiny, but as a ship focused on deployments and attacks on the ground, I'd love to have an example of what that gameplay is going to look like going forward. I think the Sandworm is a great example of a time that I would love to break out the TAC, but there's no harm in waiting to see. Things change all the time in Star Citizen, so the safest way to play this would be to purchase a relatively cheap $5 to $10 CCU to lock in that price while we're waiting to see how these ships develop. At the end, if you don't end up liking it, you can always melt that CCU. With the MAX variant specifically, we should see it go live in just over a month, so there is no harm in waiting to walk around it in a friend Starlancer before you commit to it yourself. Will you be picking up any of the Starlancers? Where do you think these ships will fit in with the competition? Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.